Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken and I'm joined by my usual co-host and colleague Brian Dick. Hello Brian, how are you doing?
Yeah, really well, thank you. Enjoying the relentless march towards the League One title. That's what it's turning into, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, just to lay the table for people listening today, we are going to be talking about the Huddersfield game very briefly because we do apologise. We have come at it a little bit late this week and talking about what it means for the League One picture more than anything else, because Blues are in a very commanding position right now at the top of the table. Then looking at Rotherham, a little bit on transfers because we are going into the end of the transfer window, which seems weird to say on January 31st, but there's a few more days to go yet, and yeah, just general ramblings and musings. So, Brian, without further ado, the Huddersfield game, a 1-0 win, sealed by an absolute stunner from Keshi Anderson. It feels like Blues are getting very close to job being done, almost done.
Yeah. Clearly there's 20 games left, aren't there? So, they're not going to get promoted on 60 points, but they are marching along at a handsome rate. And they didn't ever really feel a huge amount of jeopardy in that Huddersfield game. You'd look at the Wrexham one, and that was a bit white knuckle, wasn't it? Blues were pretty fortunate to hang on to a point there, but it wasn't as convincing as the 1-0 home thrashing against Huddersfield. But there were shades too. Blues are quite comfortable against these opponents. This is a decent matchup. I tweeted at half-time saying, looks okay, just need a bit of quality. The quality was lacking, and then what a moment of quality.
Yeah, a superb strike. And like you say, Brian, I didn't feel like Blues were ever really going to concede in that game. I think the Huddersfield's best chance actually arrived in the second minute with that Dion Charles header that was straight at Ryan Allsop. So Blues excellent defensively yet again. You never really have too many worries with Christoph Clara and Ben Davies when the ball comes into the box. And obviously at the end, Chris Davies made sure of the win by bringing on Christian Bielik and Grant Hanley as well and just packing his box with defensive monsters. And yeah, Blues saw out the job comfortably. If we're going to look at the league table now, because I have put it on the running order.
Yeah, but Alex, before we can do that, just a quick take about probably the main talking point other than Anderson's goal, which was the tackle from Hogg on Iwata.
Yeah.
That was spiteful to me, that one. I'm in VAR, he gets sent off, doesn't he, if that's a Premier League tackle? Yeah,
our colleague Richard Wilford actually summed it up quite well to me afterwards, saying that he felt like a former Villa player looking to have the last laugh against Birmingham City, because it just was unnecessary that late in the game. When Iwata played so well, it was about to go off, and then all of a sudden, he's on the end of this horrible challenge. And like you say, Brian, with VAR, I think that is a red card. And it was a really poor one because Chris Davies said it's not as bad as first fear for Iwata in terms of an injury, but he still could miss some games again, having only just come back. So for a professional to do one like that to another professional feels a bit poor on Hogg's part.
Yeah, it was a nasty watch. Did not like that at all. But yeah, go on. Let's move on to the league table, which is much more pleasurable viewing.
Yeah, so fair play to Wycombe as well, because they seem to be keeping pace and obviously got another last-minute win against Barnsley, a 2-1 win. Kone again coming up with the goods, now top scorer in League One, scored both goals in that game, and they seem to be resisting transfer offers left, right, and centre for him. I read the other day, I don't know how true this is, about a £6 million bid for Kone that had been turned down. So if they are turning down those sorts of numbers, you can see they are really, trying to take this chance to get promoted alongside Blues. And it does feel like there is that gap for another team to come through. And Wycombe in the driving seat. So Blues top, 26 games played, 60 points. Wycombe second, 28 games played, 58 points. Wrexham, 28 games played, 52 points. And Huddersfield, 27 games played, 48. So the big thing about Tuesday's win at Huddersfield for me is not that Wycombe won, because I think that's irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. It's that Wrexham lost and Huddersfield lost, obviously, to Blues on the same night. So Blues are now 8 points clear of Wrexham with 2 games in hand. Those games in hand are against Cambridge and later on at home. You would like to think that becomes 14 points. Huddersfield, 48 points. Blues are 12 ahead of them with a game in hand. You would like to think that becomes 15 points. So that, at this stage of the season, we are like you say, Brian, 20 games out from the finish. But that's verging on unassailable lead, isn't it? Blues would have to do something really wrong, in the remaining 20 games for that gap to be made up.
Yeah, it's like a marathon, isn't it? You can just see the leader starting to relentlessly pull away from the chasing pack, can't you? And as you say, it's not a completely clear situation because there are those games in hands, and you do worry about saying, those 2 home games for Blues equal 6 points because it's never quite that straightforward. But you look at the track record and the unbeaten run. We're going back to, when was the Shrewsbury game? Was it November?
End of November, yeah.
End of November. You're going back to 2 months now to the last time they lost. It's the consistency that is just going to break all the chasers, and it is doing so, and they're starting to melt away. It just seems implausible now, doesn't it, that with a huge lead over Huddersfield and potentially a very big lead over Wrexham as well, feels potential that having gone 2 months unbeaten, 15 games, is it now?
16
games,
yeah.
Feels incomprehensible that after 16 games they're suddenly going to fall off a cliff and allow the other teams to rein them in. I've just sort of pulled up the results against the chasing pack, the top 6. The home and away. So the rest of the top 6, as you said, obviously Blues and Wickham. Then it's Wrexham, Huddersfield, Stockport, and Leyton Orient. So of those 5 opponents, there's only 2 remaining sort of games of the double headers to come. They haven't yet played Wickham or Orient at home. So they've played 8 matches against the chasing pack, and they've won 6 of them and drawn 2. And that chasing pack would have been looking forward to Blues at home, thinking, right, this is a big game for us. We can potentially put a dent in them and eat into this deficit a little bit. And Blues have either beaten them more often than not, or escaped with a draw, or got a draw. So it just doesn't seem to be a chink in the armour or a dropping of the pace at the moment, does there?
Yeah, Chris Davies keeps pointing out that the bad results are coming against so-called lesser teams in the league, aren't they? Yeah. Their record against top 6, even the ones just below that, actually, probably the whole entire top half, has been really, really good. Obviously, they've got the chance to right the wrong of that Charlton defeat as well. I think is it next month, in February. So yeah, that's really told, especially these 2 games away from home against Wrexham and Huddersfield. I looked at those thinking, if they can avoid defeat in these 2 games, then they really are almost there. And to get 4 points, I think is excellent. It would take something for them to catch them now. And their record against those teams has been paramount to their success.
Just going back to your point about Wickham, it's massively impressive that they have kept pace with Blues. Just 2 points off. Yes, there's a couple of games in hand, but it feels like the late winners and coming from behind and the results they're getting at home just feels like they're going to be the team that keeps pace with Blues and not necessarily chases them down and overhauls them, because I don't think they will. But I see more chinks in Wrexham and Huddersfield than I do in Wickham. And, I'd be willing to bet 10 quid of your money that the top 2 is as it is now at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'd quite like it if Wickham went up at this point, to be honest, because they are, probably haven't had the kind of riches that Wrexham and Huddersfield have had. Huddersfield just coming down from the Championship have spent quite a lot of money this month as well. And are probably a smaller club in name than all the other 3 up there as well. So it would be kind of romantic, I suppose, from a football perspective, if Wickham were the team that could keep pace. And also kind of contradicts everything we learnt in August, because, as I've said a few times on the podcast, out of the 4 league teams Blues played in August, Wickham were the worst in my eyes. So for them to come through and be Blues' biggest challengers is quite remarkable in itself. And also they've had to deal with the adversity of losing their manager as well. Yeah,
indeed. I think haven't had a shot in the arm this week that Caleb Taylor's gone back there on loan as well from Albion. So that he was a key player for them in the first half of the season, wasn't there? So you made reference to the manager change. Doesn't feel like it's disrupted too much yet. Obviously, if someone new comes in and throws the baby out with the bathwater and they decide to do something wildly different, then that could upset them. But, any manager who knows anything is probably just going to come in and say, right, just keep doing what you're doing. Maybe it's not the style I want us to end up at. But for the time being, we'll keep the show on the road. Anyway, enough about Wickham. Blues play Rotherham this weekend, don't they?
Yes, they do. And Rotherham's always interesting because I remember, a couple of days before Steve Evans-Lewis press conference, and you're just kind of waiting to see what he says, really, aren't you? Because, after what he said before the game in September, Real Birmingham, Galacticos of League One, you expect something interesting, but he's actually toned it down a little bit this time. Probably learned from the mistakes of last game where Blues obviously wiped the floor with Rotherham. Very respectful. I'll read his quote out now, actually. Everyone in this league, including myself, has spoken in the past about how much money the likes of Birmingham, particularly Birmingham and Wrexham, are spending, but Chris Davis can only spend it wisely, and they have spent it very, very wisely. They've got a squad that will grace the championship and do well. I think they will win the league by 10 or 12 points, but it doesn't mean that 3 of those points will come against us on Saturday. So Rotherham are an interesting team, actually, because we all expected them to be one of the challengers, didn't we? Just coming down. Steve Evans signed about 45 players before we got to July.
Do you remember the sort of
panic?
The panic when Johnson Clark-Harris got cherry picked off? I think he scored 6 so far, hasn't he? So, sorry, go on. I interrupted you then.
No, so they've won. They've actually picked up in the last few weeks, won 3 of the last 4 in the league, and not that far away from the playoffs anymore. They've got, I think, 7 or 8 points to make up still, but it's not impossible now, whereas they were 17th, 18th for the first half of the season pretty much. So they have improved. You'd expect they'd come on strong because obviously he's a manager who knows how to get out of this league. But still, I would expect Blues to get the better of them, especially at home. Blues are one of 4 teams in the top 4 divisions that have got an unbeaten record at home, still along with Arsenal, Burnley and Sunderland. So, Blues massive favourites, but Rotherham probably in a better place than they were when Blues played them earlier in the season.
Yeah, they are. Just looking at their stats and their makeup, they're very good at set pieces, aren't they? I think they find it, or they contribute quite a large proportion of their goals. And Blues defensively against set pieces are masterful, aren't they? Comfortably the best record in the league, I think, for defensive set pieces. Is that right?
Right up there, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think they compare quite well to Rotherham. Rotherham don't tend to dominate the ball. I think they're averaging about 46% in terms of possession, so that'll probably go down this weekend. We're probably going to see a case of, them being quite direct, being dangerous at set pieces, maybe a mid-block, maybe even a low block, and this familiar pattern of what Blues have to do to break down these teams at home. The back 5, the template, as Chris Davis calls it. We could potentially see another one of those this weekend as well.
It's interesting because Rotherham went to a back 5 when they played Blues earlier in the season, but they had been playing at 4-4-2 diamond, and quite a lot of their games recently again have been that 4-4-2 diamond. So it's whether Evans kind of sticks to his guns and says, I'm going to do what we've been doing to get a success, or I'm going to change again, because it went so badly last time in that first half. I don't think he will.
Right.
I think we might actually see a team come and play without a back 5, which might make for a more interesting and open game at least. But then again, I suppose there are ways of playing very defensively minded with a back 4 as well, aren't there?
I suppose what it does do is it, potentially if it's Jay or Alfie as the striker, it potentially means they're not going to be quite as outsized, or however you want to describe it, in terms of one fairly slightish or smallish player up against 3 centre halves. But everything feels a little bit better, and you're more excited about the attacking potential with Anderson back fit again, aren't you? And if that supply line is there, then you would expect him to pick out and whoever the striker is, 2 or 3 times at least in this game on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm glad you've mentioned Anderson, because he probably does deserve a little bit more of a mention on this podcast. I know we praised him, I think, December time when he was obviously in that really good run of form, but I've been kind of delving into the stats on him recently, and even dating back to last season, Blues are so much better when he does start. When you think of Blues' run of form last season and the amount of games they lost in the Championship, Keshi Anderson made 12 starts in the league, 5 wins, 5 draws, 2 defeats. So, maybe if they've played Keshi Anderson a little bit more often, they might not have ended up going down. But obviously, he was only in favour under Eustace and Rowett right at the end of the season. So, he's clearly an integral player to Chris Davies this season. And what a way to come back into the team with that goal at Huddersfield. And to be fair to him, he did well at Wrexham as well, didn't he?
I think looking at Keshi Anderson's story as a whole, this is a guy that arrived on trial effectively, wasn't he? Not last season, the season before. I think the first time we saw him was it a pre-season against Solihull?
Yep.
And he looked impressive in that. And you hesitate to use the word indispensable about a winger because you kind of think of wingers as interchangeable and maybe a little bit flaky. But Anderson's consistency and how far he's come from a season out effectively with injury at Blackpool to a trial and winning himself a contract in a case of a few weeks at Blues, and then being so important. And I don't think we realised the importance last season, whether Anderson was there or not, did we? It's only sort of dawning on us now a little bit. It's a really impressive comeback from a guy who must have wondered what his next career step was.
Yeah, I say last season we were probably taken by the occasional moments of brilliance from a Dembele or a Miyoshi. Miyoshi was more consistent than Dembele, but mainly Dembele because that's who Anderson would have been competing with for a position mainly in the team. Yeah. Whereas this season he's been up against three other wingers. And to be honest, it's probably been the one department in the whole makeup of Blues team that has really not impressed that much. Yeah. It's been quite a weak department for Blues. Yokoyama's not had the league minutes and not been able to win over Chris Davies. Scott Wright hasn't been able to do it when he started games. He's made a good impact off the bench at times and probably now will revert to that role with Anderson back. And obviously Hansen has had two longer injuries and didn't really provide the goals or assists that his record at Heracles the last couple of years had promised when he joined in the summer. So Anderson's taken his chance, and he didn't start the season in the team, but he's taken his chance and done really well. And like you say, Brian, I think he probably is getting towards the undroppable stage.
It's not even close as to whose best winger is it? Not even close.
No, absolutely not. I mean, four has gone into one for quite a lot of this season with Jay Stansfield playing on the wide left. So it's Anderson. Definitely over the three. You
mentioned Jay there. Should we move on to Jay?
Yeah, it's a conversation worth having, isn't it? I think. So this obviously relates to his form. It's been a bit of a strange season, I think, for Stansfield because on the face of it, his numbers have been really good in terms of goals, goal contributions. 14. I've got the actual number. So it's 12 in 20 in League One. And 14 in 23 in all competitions. Obviously, he scored twice against Fulham's 21s in the EFL Trophy. But 5 of those goals in the league have been penalties, so he's got 7 from open play. And if you look at the games that he's played this season, he's only scored from open play against 5 different opponents because obviously he scored a couple of braces. So, yeah, it's what just generally, Brian, what would you make of his form this season? Because I was speaking to Chris Davies about it at this week's presser, and I'll chip in with that in a bit.
I would say the things that stand out about Jay this season would be his goals have all felt important. I think he's become a scorer of important goals rather than an important goal scorer. It feels like Alfie May is probably feeling a little bit more prolific in terms of getting more chances and taking them. But yeah, I suppose if someone comes into the league and you've spent, let's say, 15 million, whatever it is, I know there's some quibbling about that. You expect them to absolutely rip it up and score 40 goals, don't you? I don't think that's the way this Blues team isn't built that way. Jay's had to make a sacrifice from a positional point of view. The team does look more balanced with Alfie as the 9. It would be interesting to see if someone else could solve the left-sided wing position issue and let Jay play as the 9 himself. It would be interesting to see where we go from there, but we're not in that world at the moment, are we? I potentially think Jay could become an important goal scorer and more prolific and getting more chances if he was playing as the 9, clearly. But the team functions best with him as the wide and Alfie playing as the 9. So it's not been underwhelming, But it's just sort of it's on the slow boil at the moment, isn't it? Rather than absolutely, bubbling away.
Mate,
what do you think?
Just quickly, maybe the answer to the positional problem would be to play him as the striker again, or at least in the middle, and have Anderson continue on the wide on the left wing like he played against Huddersfield, and maybe have Willem and Dowell together, one as the 10, one as the right-sided winger, coming inside and led, obviously using that space on the overlap. So, I think
I'm not a massive fan of Willem on the right. I've got to be honest.
No, Willem would be in the middle, I think, with Dowell on the right.
Right.
Chris Davies did suggest that could be an option after Dowell joined. So, my own thoughts are in the just. I think we're still trying to work out where his best position is. I think for a lot of last season, even though he's playing up front and scoring goals, we thought that he probably wasn't at his best with his back to goal, and that was definitely a feeling that some of his managers had as well. I don't think Tony Mowbray would have played him up front so much had he had a better striking option. I don't think Gay Wright would have had he had a more kind of mobile target man type striker. Someone of a younger Lucas Djukovic or a Clayton Donaldson like he had in his first spell at Blues. I think it was
Clayton.
It was by necessity really that Stansfield had to play up front. This season, he started up front clearly because that's where Chris Davies wanted him. I think he was moved because May wasn't anywhere near as effective as the 10, and obviously we know Stansfield can play deeper. I just think his performances have the way the system works. I don't feel like kind of really gets Stansfield's strengths out a lot of the time. When I think of Jay Stansfield, I think of an all-action footballer who chases every lost cause, runs more than most of other forwards, gets himself into positions where he can take a lot of shots, like we saw against Barnsley, plays a lot off the cuff, like an instinctive type of player. And maybe that's kind of because Blues have got so much of the ball and it's so controlled in their movements and they know everything that's going to happen. Maybe that kind of instinct's just been lost a little bit in the way that Blues have played.
It's not been lost, not been harnessed, maybe. Or...
Not harnessed. Chris Davies speaking about it actually this week, kind of suggested that when Stansfield's not such a marked man and Blues are back in the Championship, that maybe kind of he'll have more joy and more freedom. He thinks he's handled the whole kind of pressure of the price tag and everything quite well, and you can't argue with that because the numbers have been good.
I'd agree with that. Good. And his demeanour. Yeah, his demeanour's been good around it as well, hasn't it? And everything he said has been mature about all that nonsense, and he is under more scrutiny than any other player in the league.
Yeah, it's not like he's come down to League One and completely wilted and done nothing. He's one of the top scorers in the league, isn't he? And I think it's interesting that fans aren't really singing what a waste of money to him anymore. That's happened maybe 3-4 times this season. When it could have really realistically be happening every single game, but because he scored so many goals against these teams, their fans haven't been able to, haven't had a leg to stand on with that chance. So I think we will see a better Jay Stansfield in Championship. I think he was better last season, I will say that, but that was in a Blues team that was poor, that he was by far and away the best player, and kind of the one everyone looked to for inspiration. I'm just interested mostly to see where he ends up playing long term, because I do think he needs a position. If he's going to be a striker, he's going to be a striker. If he's going to be a number 10, we haven't seen him in the 10 position for a long time, but I actually thought he was really good there when he first came to Blues. And I know he liked playing there.
Davis might potentially, play a bit of formation soup with you there. He might describe him as a left-sided 10, mightn't he? He
has been, hasn't he? Because Davis will say that he does play with 2 10s when Blues are in possession, and Stansfield, along with Willem, a lot of the time has been the other 10. So, just I wouldn't say it's been underwhelming, as you said, Brian. You maybe expected more, but it was never going to be a case of Stansfield comes down to League One, he's miles better than everyone and scores 40 goals. I think it's been a good return. I don't think it's been an exceptional season.
He's been a cog in a very functional machine, hasn't he? A lovely cog to have in a very functional machine, rather than the sort of the star on top of the Christmas tree. That everyone's saying, "Stop Stansfield, stop Birmingham," and I suppose Chris Davies had to go that way. He had to build a system that overwhelmed teams rather than relied on Jay Stansfield being the best player in the league week in, week out. Let's remember his age as well.
Yeah,
he's a young man. Not quite in his first full season. Not his first full season of senior football, is it? He's had a couple now, but everything's new. These are all new experiences for him. As he's carrying a lot of burden, and I suppose the best thing to say is what we've seen this season. There's nothing to dissuade us that Blues have made a mistake, or persuade us that Blues have made a mistake, or dissuade us of his massively high ceiling, is there?
Definitely not, because you've got a ready-made, proven championship striker there. And another thing I will quickly add is that last season he was playing in a team where everyone looked to him and we all thought he was by shoulders above his Blues teammates. And yet this season they've got probably 4 or 5 players who are maybe on his level. So it's not as easy to be the standout, is it? And maybe we shouldn't expect that. So
Blues aren't looking for one saviour, are they? Exactly. At the moment?
Exactly.
Jay was the only shining hope, wasn't he, at times last season? And I suppose we should applaud the fact he's not the only shining hope this season, rather than say, why isn't he the only shining hope? He must be failing. Yeah,
perfect.
So, which brings us on to transfers, doesn't it? Transfer window closes on Monday at 11 o'clock. Strange timing, Monday, Monday the 3rd, but that's fine. What's kicking around at the moment, Alex, in terms of the transfer scenarios that Blues will be considering?
Yeah, so we've had Grant Hanley and Kieran Dowell, and I think it's safe to say that unless something absolutely exceptional pops up, the idea is to sign a left back before the window closes. I've always felt this is a bit of a difficult sell to sign a left back when you've got Alex Cochrane, who's been so good this season, started 29 games in all competitions. It's probably going to be first choice because Chris Davies trusts him so much now. So you're hoping that kind of the sell of being able to kind of play the remaining games of a Virtue Trophy campaign and coming into the league team sometimes is enough of a kind of carrot for someone to say, yes, we'll loan you this talented youngster and you can have him for the remaining 3 months of the season. The good thing for Blues is that they do have a number of right backs who can play at left back if needs be. So I don't think it's an absolute necessity that they do sign a left back, but they obviously want one for balance purposes.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world, is it, if the transfer window closes and Alex Cochrane is standing as the only recognised left back. Laird's done a reasonably good job over there. Samstead can do a job over there as well. So, as I say, it's not the end of the world. And with the risk of repeating you, which is what I'm going to do, it is a very difficult brief to sell to some club that maybe wants to get a talented 19-year-old 20 games in League One. It's a really difficult sell.
I feel like you'd probably be better going out and signing a left back you think can get you out of the Championship. That might be an easier sell because you say you're going to come in and fight Cochrane for the spot. And then you're going to be, with us next season as well. Or
a Grant Hanley type, is there someone at the other end of their career that they could potentially, say, here's a 5-month, 6-month contract, come and see out the season with us. That might be more sellable or more achievable in the last couple of days of the window. But I don't think you're going to find a successor or a challenger to Alex Cochrane in the final 2 days of the transfer window.
No, it's going to be tough.
The other ones kicking around?
Yeah, outgoings are difficult because Alfie Chang's the one I think they'd like to get out. But obviously, I don't think he's kind of got fit as quickly as they would have liked or he would have liked. I think he's due to play another 21s game. So I guess it'll depend how well he comes through that and how well he feels after that game. As to whether they actually do loan him out for the remainder of the season. There'll be plenty of takers for him in Leagues 1 and 2, I would suspect. Ramel Donovan seems to be in a little bit of limbo at the moment. He's obviously only 18 years old, so there's no real kind of pressure to get him out on loan. He's had that loan spell at Burton that didn't go well, and Blues are mindful of putting him in that situation again away from home because he is so young. So it wouldn't surprise me if he sees that season with the 21s. Chris Davies has made it clear that he won't form part of his first team plans for the remainder of this season. So it wouldn't surprise me if they do keep him around in the 21s and just focus on developing him and getting him happy playing football again, basically. An interesting one will be Yokoyama. Blues, I believe, have fielded a few loan inquiries for him. We have kind of kicked it around the podcast before about Yokoyama not getting many minutes at all in the league, at least, and has had to make do with Virtue Trophy starts, basically. So we thought it was worth getting him out on loan, didn't we? And I do think that is a possibility in the remainder of the window.
Do you think Dowell's situation changes Yokoyama? Kieran Dowell coming in. Kieran Dowell is not a left winger, and I'm not suggesting he's anything like the same profile as Ayumi Yokoyama. But does the extra body in the attacking line, does that go against Yokoyama?
I think so, Brian, because I said earlier, Davis says Dowell could play as an inverted right winger, like he played at Norwich, and Davies did reference that. So he is all of a sudden in the conversation to be one of the wingers. Jay Stansfield has been in the conversation to be one of the wingers. Keshi Anderson is the first choice winger. And then behind Anderson, you've got Hansen and Scott Wright, who are comfortably ahead of Yokoyama in the eyes of Chris Davies. So I think more often than not, when people do get fit, Yokoyama wouldn't be making match day squads. And there is only going to be potentially, 3 more Virtue Trophy games for him. And I don't think he'd start the FA Cup game against Newcastle. So
it's Yokoyama's destiny to score the winner at Wembley in the Virtue Trophy, though.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be nice. But then if he's only got 3 games left this season, it might only be 1, to be fair. You don't know, do you?
Oh, yeah. In terms of his development, I do think a loan would be much more beneficial. But he's been probably the standout player in the Virtue Trophy, hasn't he, with 3 goals and a few assists as well. So it'd be a shame. He could still get a medal. Could he get a medal? Yeah,
I don't know. I'll have to check. It depends what you're looking for in your standout. If you're looking for the excitement that gets fans off their seats, or you're looking for the cog that makes the machine work. Sorry,
after the game at Swindon, one of the journalists there was saying basically saying to me how great Yokoyama was, and I said, he probably won't be in the squad on Saturday. He was like, what? So that's kind of where we're at. I think he's eye-catching and everyone looks at him because of obviously his skills and things and the way he kind of takes players on, which is in a way what other Blues wingers don't do as well. But yeah, I think personally probably better suited to going and playing 15, 20 games on loan second half of the season somewhere else.
Yeah, indeed. Which brings us to the rumours which seem to be more internet-driven than anything else, rumbling about Christian Bielik. You see the rumours, and then you hear what Davis is saying, and you see the way Bielik's being used. They don't marry up, do they?
Very, very different things. Yeah, I mean, you can never stop another club being interested in one of your players, can you? Or making an inquiry for one of your players. But I'd be very surprised if Blues entertained anything for Christian Bielik. He's the captain. He's very important to Chris Davies. I think Chris Davies will find a way of getting him back in the team in the very near future. It wouldn't surprise me if Tomoki Watt is not fit to play against Rotherham, that Christian Bielik was to play in his position.
Do you think? Right.
It wouldn't surprise me because Taylor Gardner-Hickman's played a lot of football recently. I think he started the last 7 games and been asked to do jobs out wide as well as in midfield. So he might need a rest. There's a Virtue Trophy game on Tuesday as well. So Bielik, I think, is probably going to have to play in that position at some point. It's quite clear Davies would prefer to play him as centre-back, but he hasn't got that many midfield options at the moment. So I definitely think he'll try and get Bielik back into his team. And I can't imagine him wanting to lose him in the final few days of the window, especially when he's just kind of got his complement of centre-backs back to full.
Be interesting to see how Bielik plays that role if he does play in midfield, because I remember, obviously we all know what Bielik is as a good ball manipulator and, a good putter out of fires in terms of playing as a 6. Remember Tony Mowbray when he first arrived at Blues, and Bielik was taking 4 or 5 touches before releasing the ball, and Mowbray was pulling his hair out, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
And I would be interesting to see what messages in terms of the speed of his distribution that Bielik would go out with if Davis does indeed play him in that position.
Could he not play it as like an old school anchor man, like a Busquets or a Rodri, and sometimes drop into the back 3 and Cochrane plays further forward?
That would work. Yeah.
That could be an option, and then you leave. Cochrane could potentially go into midfield. Laird could go into midfield to kind of get the fullbacks higher, and Bielik could just play as a centre back when Blues have got the ball. And as we've said multiple times this season, Blues do tend to have the ball quite a lot, so that could work better, I think, than him being more of an orthodox central midfield player.
Yeah, indeed. And if there is a way of harnessing his skill set and maybe papering over, whatever drawbacks there are in his game, and you can bet Chris Davis has known it for many years already and has probably been working on it. So, yeah, interesting one. I think that about wraps it up, doesn't it, Alex?
It does, yep.
Yep. Thank you for your insight again, and thank everybody for their interest and contributions to the episode. Do leave a message or a like or subscribe. It helps no end. Keep right on from both of us.